get access to this.
Yep. Hello my friends and welcome to another stream of Adobe Live. It's actually our last stream, so we've saved the best for last. Today we have author and personal brand expert Stefanie Sword-Williams. Stefanie, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to have you. I'm so excited. I've seen everything on social media all about you, so I'm very happy to be in your aura today.
Oh no, I'm super excited to be here, and likewise. Always been watching all of your stuff, so it's been great to meet you.
You're being too kind. I love that. We started the stream lovely. I like that. And of course, we've got all of our lovely folks on the stream. If you're viewing on YouTube, perhaps get those questions for Stefanie, and I'll make sure I'll feed it directly whilst we're talking. Just say hello to people on the stream. You can see Doris, Verb, Tim, Isha. Massive welcome. So, obviously, second day of D&AD. How have you found it all? Because there's a lot happening, but it's been how in your space?
It's been great. It's been so nice. I remember coming to D&AD like 5 years ago when I first moved to London, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so in awe of
Disneyland,
everything.
right?
Like literally Disneyland. And I love Adobe as a brand, and when I got asked to sort of work with Adobe, it was amazing. So I feel like it's the merging of two loves of mine. But yeah, it's been so nice and so inspiring to see lots of other talks. And I think for me, I don't always get to listen to other people's sessions, so it's nice to sit in and hear what everyone else has been saying.
Be in the passenger seat rather than...
It is.
Because I know you also did is it a workshop as well?
Yeah, I've done 2 workshops over the last 2 days, so yeah.
How did that go as well?
Yeah, really good. I think usually when I give a workshop, today was around self-promotion, I often talk and share the advice, but I don't get to see how people implement it, so getting to see how they've made their own graphics and social media assets has been super cool.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned that self-promotion. I know a lot of the core of what you do is actually the idea of feeling comfortable maybe in your body and in your skin and the idea of self-promotion. Well, how did that come about? Is that like from a maybe experience you had maybe kind of in the industry, or was it more things you've seen actively in this space? Like where did this, because we all have to have that elements of self-promotion. Where did that come from?
It's like a mixture of reasons.
Sure.
So I worked in advertising full time, and I used to work in client management and new business, and I learned a lot about new business and selling and how hard it is and how you have to pitch yourself and win clients, and I got that exposure quite early on, so I learned this strategy behind new business and self-promotion quite early. I also moved jobs quite regularly, so I had to do a lot of interviews and I had to apply for things and rewrite my CV, so I got quite comfortable.
Itself, right? Yeah.
Literally, I got comfortable with pitching myself. And then I also had loads of friends. I was like a bit of a career agony aunt. Like people would come to me and be like, Steph, how do I update my portfolio, or how do I update my website? And because I had this mixture of experiences, I combined it into one, and I just felt like there needed to be a more relatable voice in the careers industry, and I wanted to create a brand that had that tone and that connection with people that was better than shoot for the stars, you know?
I love that. I'm thinking of stars in your eyes so randomly. Anyway, but I know what you mean, that element of, I don't want to say cheesiness, but maybe not feeling as related, well, not even human maybe. Like, I feel like the essence
quite corporate.
It's very corporate now. And you mentioned like you work in advertising and these industries, which are amazing of course for everyone there, but maybe when you're in it yourself, it's not maybe what you envisioned, and actually you have to do different things to realise what you want to be doing.
Totally. I think for me personally, it's like I've always had such a creative mind and loved coming up with ideas and creating a brand of my own where I had full autonomy, total exploration and freedom to do whatever I wanted to do, just allowed me to push limits a bit more. And I really advise that to people listening, definitely think about those passion projects and things you can do outside of work, because it allows you to do the things that you maybe want to do that you don't always get to do during your day.
And it probably keeps you sane, right? Like I feel like a lot of the audience that we have is students, graduate, it ranges of different skills, and I know sometimes maybe you're in maybe perhaps a job that you maybe not necessarily want to be, but you do it because of got to make a living, mortgage, whatever. But when you have that sort of side hustle, you can kind of feed your energy into something you want to be doing, though. I don't know.
Absolutely, especially when you're working long hours. Like when I started my business and community, I was working full time. I had 8 months to write my book, and I was also running events and everything all by myself, non-stop. So you have to literally love what you're doing. You can't just do a passion project for a side project if there's no passion or love to it. And I think that's where people trip themselves up and they burn themselves out. So I always say to people, it's like, what skills would you love to be using that you're not? What passions or interests do you have, or what expertise could you bring to life or help to build your profile that actually help other people? That's how you're going to raise your profile.
And you kind of threw in that mix just casually. You wrote a book, no, if I'm right in saying.
I have.
Yeah, perhaps we tell our lovely audience about this so we can get a feel for it as well.
Yeah, so the title on the book says why self-promotion isn't a dirty word, and for me that is my biggest mission to really change the way people perceive the word self-promotion, to really explain to them it's not arrogant, it's not self-indulgent, and it doesn't have to be this tacky thing to do. And particularly when I speak to creatives as well, I feel like we're so focused on doing the do that we forget to tell the story of how we've got there, or explain the process.
So true.
And we often put things out into the world and we think that the internet's going to break, or my followers are going to go up to 100k overnight, and it's not that way. And so much of the storytelling that supports our successes is how we get seen. So I always say to people, don't miss out on an opportunity to build an emotional connection by not telling people the journey you've been on to get to that achievement. And that's why I think storytelling and self-promotion is just so needed in your creative career.
It's interesting that it's like over the years you've been to various places and you've seen it firsthand, and actually this is why it's compelled you to actually it's to make a change, and you have made a change impactfully, but it's kind of going back to that old the passion as well, right? That you're actually generally interested in this, but you can see people maybe need the help, and sometimes the tools they don't necessarily have, so like this book can actually help them into actually getting a bit more comfortable and confident in that space.
And I think that when I first started Being Humble, my focus was just to run amazing community events where people would learn. It was interactive workshops. But I got approached to write a book, and I remember being like, I'm not a writer, I can't do this, no. But what I realised was like, it's bigger than just me, and like, if I write a book, this has the potential to reach so many more people. So I did it, even with huge amounts of imposter syndrome, but it's that go-to guide, and I often get tagged in photos on Instagram where people have got like sticky notes on every page, or they're rereading it, or they've passed it on to, I had somebody tell me they'd passed it on to 10 members of people, like members of their family. And it's one of those things that I feel like it's going to be a resource that sits on your bedside table like forever, because sometimes you just need that boost of confidence.
I get that, yeah. And to be fair, where we're at today, obviously being at the very sunny Trim Brewery in D&AD, obviously we can see it from out here, a lot of cool work, a lot of inspiration. And I think that's where it's sort of cool to sort of absorb all this inspiration there, because you're kind of surrounded left, right and centre, whether it's workshops or talks or streams like this. And how have you kind of found that element of going through the work and seeing all the different type of work? How have you engaged with it?
I actually went and met my friend for dinner last night, and I was like, I have so many ideas from listening to like two workshops, looking at the work, and I was sort of saying to my friend, I was like, we have to book to come to more conferences, go to more events. We get so stuck on scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through social media, and we just don't actually like take ourselves out of those environments. And every time I do, I have all these sparks flying. I always say to people, get to networking events, and just go absorb. Like I always think like bookshops are amazing, galleries, like even museum shops. I always think you see so many different things in there, and it's like, take yourself out of the environments that you constantly get stuck in, because it's so easy to look at the same inspiration and still not feel inspired, because it's not inspiration, right? Of
course. And to be fair, I feel like for a lot of, maybe if you're in that freelance space, that in itself can be quite, I mean, even from experience as a freelancer, you can almost have like a Batman cave kind of syndrome where you're just tunnel vision, though, and it's so healthy, right? You said like to kind of get out there, visit events like this, and just be out there and actually connect up with creatives, right, at events, to kind of feel like you can kind of get that creative itch kind of scratched in a sense, as it were, right? So you feel like you can,
And that's actually a topic I cover in my book, all about networking, and in my workshops. Is I had somebody come up to me at an event recently, and they were like, how do I network with someone at a big event like this if I'm not very good at networking or I'm shy? And my tip to anyone listening is ask loads of questions. So don't make it about you. So if we meet today, I'd ask you loads of questions, because the more questions I ask you, I can pitch myself back better to you. But if I go straight in and sell myself, I might not do a very good job. So if you're ever in a networking situation, a big event like this, make the most of asking questions so that you can sell yourself in the best way.
If we're ever on BBC Apprentice, I want you on my team. I feel like
I have thought about going on the Apprentice.
I feel like we could be in the same team. You can imagine that.
I would love that. I think we'd make a good. Actually, I think we'd probably compete. I think we'd be those two people in the
probably would, but we'll keep it PG for the stream. I imagine that. I love that. That's hilarious. And to be fair, I mean, you said there's so much gems and actually a lot of great advice for our audience, kind of digesting it all. And in this idea of, I don't know, throughout your career so far up until now, was there any kind of turning points that you kind of felt, or maybe even hurdles that you had to kind of go through, and then now you're at that point you can kind of look back and think, I'm glad I did it that, or is anything that to where you're at now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think one of the first jobs I had was actually quite a toxic environment, and I really struggled, and this is, for the student audiences listening, I got a job straight out of university. I was a graduate, got hired, but the environment I was working in just wasn't particularly nice. It wasn't very supportive or inspiring. And I stayed there for 11 months because I was like, I've got to stay here. Your parents tell you you've got to stay there for a year.
Rules,
we won't
right?
take you seriously. But it's actually not. And off the back of that, I ended up applying for jobs. I got 3 interviews. And off the back of that, I moved from Nottingham to Manchester. And that was where my life changed. I went and worked at a big ad agency. I did so much more after that. But I had the courage to walk away from a situation that wasn't serving me in order to find something better, and that started the first year of working. So I think just to anyone listening, it's important that not every day you're going to love every single part of your job, but also don't stay in environments where you don't feel excited, served, motivated, supported. Life's too short. Go find environments where you can flourish and people want to back you and they see your work and they celebrate you for that. Because otherwise it's just a really hard working week without
soul destroying, no?
Yeah,
you feel like it's, and actually even touching on even elements like the mental well-being side of things, where I don't know if you ever found this, or even friends who you know in the industry, but maybe since after pandemic or after lockdown especially, when you're back into the working environment, I have a lot of my friends that kind of they've realised you can get that hybrid of working from home maybe, and that flexibility is people had that at one stage and maybe they don't necessarily have it now, and that in itself can maybe play on your mental well-being, and there's all these elements, right, of having to maybe work in different situations that feel comfortable for you and so forth. But I
think it's important. I think connection is super important. I think in the pandemic, working from home, being able to sit in the garden and have a gin at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on a Friday.
I do love a gin.
Great.
I do love
Good
a gin.
time. But I do think I know for myself, I went from working in offices, big agencies, to working by myself automatically overnight. Pandemic shut, and that was tough. And so I think it is important to get out, have conversations, bounce off ideas with friends. My stepdad, I talk to him about all my ideas. We love Dragon's Den and Apprentice and all those. So we always bounce, and it helps me so much just picking up the phone and having one conversation. So I always say to people when they're struggling, it's please don't struggle alone. Somebody is around, somebody will listen, find a mentor, speak to peers, build that community support network. And it's particularly if you work full time, particularly if you work solo, but I think people don't network and build communities when they work in a company because they think they've got it.
Interesting.
When actually your company and your colleagues are not your only connections. And it's really important to invest in networks outside of your existing network to make sure that you've got other people to learn and grow with, and so you can identify areas where you could expand or try new things.
To be fair, I mean, you touched on so many interesting, and to be fair, I can see through the comments as well. I promise you, I'm not ignoring you, my lovely friends. We've got Reverb who said, "Wow, very inspiring," and I feel like there is that elements of all these elements, all these things kind of digest, but sometimes the confidence sometimes is never. It's easy for some, and for some it takes a lot of work to really sharpen their skills. So perhaps any kind of tips or anything you could give our audience out there for when it comes to, you mentioned that word networking, going to events. And I've definitely seen it at events, not today because everyone's here full of lovely and full of love and energy, but you go to places where people want to talk but they don't, and it's how do you kind of overcome that when you go to a place you don't know anyone necessarily? Is there a Stefanie method?
There is a Stefanie method. So I went networking when I worked full time every week, 3 to 4 times a week. So I was a networking queen, and I used to think because I talked the loudest I'd get loads of clients, and it was not the case. I used to say I was like a bull in a china shop because I just didn't know what I was doing. I was running around. But actually the best thing that you need to do is prepare before you get in the room. So research anybody that's speaking, research who might be attending, look on social media, check hashtags or what content might be out there already. So that when you get in the room, you've got something to speak about. So if someone's oh, what brought you to the event today? You've got an answer ready, or you can start that conversation. I like that. Like I said, loads of questions, have loads of questions. The more questions you ask, the better you'll pitch yourself back.
And covered, right?
And I also think a really top tip I'd give is go with a friend and let them be your hype man or woman, right? So exchange, so say we're going into an event together. What would you love to get working? What would your ideal be?
My baby's editorial.
Editorial, right?
So,
print. So, and mine's public speaking. So you would tell me everything you want. I tell you. We go into networking event. I'd be like, you need to check out his work in editorial. It is so good. Yeah. And you'd be like,
I'll be too shy in the corner.
You'd be like, don't listen to me. You need to check out Steph. She's an amazing speaker. The nice thing about that, and the reason we don't like self-promote is because we don't like talking about self. But every time I'm like, what does your best mate do that's great? They're like, oh, they do this and they do that. So actually taking in a wingman when you go networking, it takes the pressure away from you just selling, and you're cross-promoting each other. So it kind of feels a bit more authentic anyway. So that's something that really helps. But if you haven't got anyone to go with, just embrace being a loner, because it's actually easier to sell yourself when your mates aren't standing there watching you.
True.
So that's my top tip. Go alone, look around the room and be like, I'm here for a reason, I'm not wasting my time.
I love that. And to be fair, I feel like, even just talking to you now, I'm getting a lot in myself, and to be honest, and I feel like I'm definitely going to bring you along when you're in London next to an event.
100%.
But we can't go to print it together because I feel like it'll be a bloodbath. But in a good way, of course. We'll keep it 100. So on that note, we've come up pretty much to the end of our stream. It's been an absolute pleasure to finally meet you and speak with you. So, on the topic of change, in keeping with the theme, did we cover that already? I'm not sure if we did.
No, we haven't.
We haven't. Okay, so much gems.
So many good stuff.
D&AD, obviously the theme is make change, that's what we're about. If there was one change you could make in the industry for the better, what would you make?
So the reason I started F Being Humble was because I wanted to celebrate more diverse voices that have amazing things to say and that didn't need to be 50 and working in a Fortune 500 company to be listened to. So I would love to see more inspiring voices from all over the world at young ages, taking up spaces on stages, on panels, spreading their message. Like, I'm 31, I've built a business in the last 5 years, I've written a book, I've done all this. I'm so grateful that I get to speak on these stages, but I want to see even more people like me. I want to see people from all over doing amazing things, getting that spotlight and feeling like they have a voice that deserves to be listened to. Not that they have to spend 50 years working in an industry before they're listened to. So I think there's amazing talent, particularly in London, but all over the world, that really deserve that spotlight and the stages, but I think we could do better in giving them a place.
To be honest, the way I see it as well, even companies, they will benefit from this, though, because having a different perspective on the certain ways that they might do things is very different to how I won't say younger generation, it makes sound like old farts, but do you know what I mean? Like, in a sense where they're looking from a very different perspective, so it's only healthy to do that. And hopefully, if you are senior creators or CEOs watching this stream, you heard Steph, and obviously you get a feel for it. Stefanie, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you. For those who want to follow up about you on social media, where can they find you on?
Just follow at F Being Humble on socials, and you can add me on LinkedIn, Stefanie Sword-Williams, and if you've got any questions, you can drop me an email if you head to our website as well. So would love to hear from you. You're
going to get many comments on being the wing woman, I imagine, just like a filter system of going through that. Stefanie, it's been an absolute pleasure.
So nice to meet you.
Hope you enjoyed it. And that is it for today, my friends. It's been an amazing 2 days of streams. Hope you enjoyed it. And of course, always rewatch our streams online because they'll be online. So until next time, take it easy. Ciao.